Stephen Khaw again, and today I would like to share with you why selling is not about luck. Now, selling is actually a process-driven activity. If you look carefully, you understand that you can actually master the sales process. The moment you master the sales process, you will discover wonders. You will discover that luck no longer play an important role in your selling activity. So subscribe to this video and you will receive more updates. Remember to click the notification button to have our live updates as well as new video updates. Now let's move back into selling itself. So if selling is about process driven, selling is controlled by a process. So how many stages or how many steps that you need to look into, right? So if you look carefully, there are actually 6 steps in selling that you need to master, that you must master in order to sell effectively. Now let's look into all the 6 steps and I will share with you briefly on each steps and what you need to take note of. All right. So let's move into our step number 1. Now, our step number 1 is all about prospecting. Outside, the market is huge, and you just can't sell to everybody in the market. You know that your product is not meant for everybody. You know that your solution is not meant for everybody. So you need to do a prospecting stage. You need to do a prospecting activity. So what are we talking about here is that prospecting is about converting suspect into your prospect. Now, who is suspect? Suspect is anybody outside in the market that, well, indirectly, you can say that indirectly linked to your product or solutions. So you need to transform the suspect into your prospects by qualifying them. All right. There are 6 steps in qualifying a suspect into a prospect. All right. So I will share with you the 6 steps in the next video. So remember to subscribe to our channel so that you can have the updates as well as the notifications. Right. So that is step 1. Now, what about step 2? Step 2 is about initial contact. Now, the moment you identify your prospect, you need to initiate the first contact with them. Now, a lot of people will say that initial contact, normal lah, I can do it. But it's not really so. How are you going to break the ice, especially if you are selling to the corporates? Now, if you are selling to the corporates, most probably you're going to see them in the first meeting. So how do you build rapport? How do you break the immediate ice in order to, well, to connect with them, to bond with them? And you need to do that in most probably less than 5 minutes durations at the beginning of the meeting or the beginning of your first encounter with your corporate clients, right? So that is actually step number 2. And once you do that, once you are able to build rapport, then you will need to look into your step 3. Now, your step 3 is talking about needs identifications. General rules in selling, you cannot sell to a person who do not need your product, right? So very, very clear cut. You can't sell to a person who does not need your product. So you need to identify their needs. Now, needs are divided into 2 categories. You have your conscious needs as well as subconscious needs. Right. So the differences between conscious needs and subconscious needs, I will explain it in the next video. All right. So let's move on into step number 4. Right. If you look into once you're able to identify the needs, then you need to present your solutions. Either is your product, tangible product, or intangible product, which is your services, or you are a solution provider, you need to provide your solutions. You need to present your solutions. Now, presenting a solution is not about telling your prospect everything that you have. So if you tell everything that you have to your prospect, most probably they got confused. Once people got confused, they will not make the buying decisions. All right. So what you need to do is first, you need to segregate are you targeting a B2B or a B2C customers, right? So determine that B2B or B2C customers. Once you have determined in terms of the type of customer that you are dealing with, then you need to embark on your strategies. So you can either use the 8-step formula strategies, or you can use the spin strategies, right? So use whatever strategy that is workable for you. And one important aspect, one important aspect when you present your solutions is that you must be able to find your prospect hot button. Now, what is actually a hot button? A hot button is actually a trigger point that will make your prospect to say, wow, this is the product that I'm looking for. Wow, this is the solutions that I'm waiting to have, right? So if you can actually hit the hot button, the trigger point of your prospects, chances are you are going to make the sales, all right? So that is actually step number 4. Now, step number 4 will not be completed if you do not move into step number 5, right? Now, what is step number 5? Step number 5 is talking about objections, handling sales objections or handling objections in general. Now, is objection good in selling? So do you prefer your whole sales process to be without any objections, or do you prefer it to be with some objections? Now, generally speaking, of course, if you look into a very shallow perspective, people will say, I don't like objections. So there is a clear, smooth process of me presenting and they buying, which is not true. Let me just tell you this: an objection is good. An objection is an intentions of the prospect to find out more so that they are clear what they are actually buying into, right? So as a salesperson, you will want to have objections, but of course, you do not want to have objections that you cannot handle, right? So let's look into objections in general. Now, objections in general, you can actually divide into 3 categories. 3 categories of objections, and the 3 categories of objections has its things that you need to look into. All right, now let me just share with you what are the 3 objections types, or the 3 types of objections. All right, so the first one is actually called a conditions. Now, conditions means that the person has actually convinced of your product, convinced of you as a salesperson, convinced of the company that represent the product. But most probably there are certain conditions that the persons will need to look into. For example, payment terms, delivery methods, delivery schedule, and things like that. All right. So that is the first one. Now, the second one would be excuses. Now, this is the worst type of objections, and this is the most stressful type of objections a lot of salespeople cannot handle, right? So either they are not convinced of you as a salesperson, they are not convinced of your product, or they are not convinced of the company that represent your product, all right? So that is the second type of objections. And the third one is about flat no. Flat no, as the name describes, you will notice that you are actually targeting the wrong type of customer. Now, if you receive a flat no objections, means that your step number 1, which is prospecting, is entirely incorrect or entirely collapsed, right? So look into your prospecting. If your prospecting is right, then you should not have a flat no objections. All right. So once you are able to do that, now what move you into the final step? The one that move you into the final step, which is step number 6, is going to be identifying the buying signals. So you need to identify the positive buying signals in order to move into the final stage, which is actually closing the deal. Now, closing the deal is very simple. It's all about some closing techniques. You can have a direct closing techniques with very direct approach. So do we have a deal, right? Now you can only do that if you have actually settled all your step 1, step 2, 3, 4, 5, and then you move into your step 6, which is it can be a direct close. But of course, you can also have alternative close. You can also have conditional close depending on your situations, depending on the needs, depending on that particular moment, right? So closing techniques is the final stage, is the final step, which is step number 6, closing the deal. So once you have the opportunity, please close the deal. Don't drag the thing. The moment you drag the conversation, most probably it will lead you to somewhere else, and the somewhere else is not something that you want to have. Right? So these are the 6 steps in terms of sales process, in terms of selling. So selling is not about luck. Selling is about process driven activity. So if you master the process, the 6-step process, chances are you are going to be an effective salesperson. All right. So let me just recap the 6 steps. Step number 1 is about prospecting, how you turn your suspect into prospect. Step number 2 is about initial contact. Once you identify your prospect, you need to build rapport with them. You need to break the ice with them. And step number 3 is talking about needs identifications. There's only 2, the differences between conscious needs as well as subconscious needs. All right. So you move into step number 4. Step number 4 is about presenting your solutions. You need to identify your strategies, right? But before that, determine whether it's a B2B customer or it's a B2C customer, right? Now, step number 5 is about handling objections. There are 3 types of objections that you need to look into. The first one is the conditions, the second one is excuses, and the third one is a flat no, right? So once you have settled all these 5 steps, remember before you move into step number 6, which is your final step, remember to identify the buying signals. All right. So once you do that, move into closing the deal. Close the deal. Use various closing techniques. You can use a direct closing techniques. Do we have a deal? Right? Or you can use alternative closing techniques or conditional closing techniques. All right. So if you like this video, please click the subscribe button. Please click the like button and share it with your friends or colleagues so that they can enjoy this video as well as benefiting from the content itself, right? So if you need anything from me, I'm Stephen Khaw, a professional trainer for the past 20 years, and I can be reachable at 016-470-5888. I repeat, 016-470-5888. You can see my contact below the video as well. All right. So with this, thank you so much for watching, and remember to subscribe our channel for more video, and remember to click the notification buttons for more updates as well. Right. So with this, Stephen Khaw signing off. Bye bye.